Jill? Jill, are you there? Jill? Hello, everyone. May I ask to see if anyone can actually see my share screen? Hello, can you see my share screen, which says Psychology of Wellbeing? No, you don't see it. Okay. How about now?
Yeah, we can see it now.
You
Yes,
can-
now yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Great.
we can see.
Okay, I think it's time we can get started now. If you can see the screen, that would be great. So we got a confirmation that you can see the screen. So welcome everyone. This is the Psychology of Wellbeing course. My name is Joe Sergi. I communicated with you by email. And we'll go through the essentially 10 webinars. The book that we'll be using is this. So in essence, it's as you can see, it's a thick book. It's 800 pages long. Again, it's available as an ebook for a very discounted price. So we can essentially use this as a textbook. The book really covers quite a bit of material. Let me just give you an idea of what it is. Well, actually, the book is, the 10 webinars are very much structured as a function of the book. So the book is broken down in terms of different parts. The first part, focuses on the definitions, distinctions, and concepts of well-being. And then again, it also focuses on the importance of the concept of well-being in terms of its positive ramifications, positive outcomes in terms of health and work and achievement and so forth. The second part focuses on objective reality and how objective reality affects, actually various dimensions of well-being in terms of technology, in terms of economics, the economic environment, the political environment, the sociocultural environment, and so forth. Resources, as in time, money, and income and wealth, effects of demographics from age to gender to family life cycle and ethnicity, minority status, what have you. And then things related to consumption, consumption activities, and then we can get into the effect of biology, drugs, life events, and actually the environment itself. These are essentially objective dimensions related to well-being. And then part 3 of the book gets into subjective reality and its effects on well-being. In that context, we talk about the effects of personality, emotions and affect, cognition, beliefs and values, needs and need satisfaction, goals, and related concepts like self-concept and social comparison. All of these are psychological concepts, and in essence, they do have a bearing on well-being. And then part 4 of the book gets into life domains. So in that context, we talk about well-being in terms of work well-being, residential well-being, material well-being, or what you might call economic well-being, social, family, and marital well-being, health well-being, leisure well-being, and other types of well-being in other domains like spiritual well-being and political, environmental, and so forth. These are essentially segments in people's minds related to certain dimensions of quality of life and well-being, and they are affected by a host of factors, and we need to understand the research behind those. Then part 5 of the book gets into population segments, so we get to talk about the well-being of women, the well-being of children and youth and older adults, and specific countries, talking about countries, you know, and what's happening in Ukraine right now and the well-being of their population. We'll talk about that shortly. And other kinds of specialty populations. And then finally, the epilogue part of the book, you know, gets into integrative models of well-being. And again, that in essence, the last webinar that we'll have. So that's the book. For those who are essentially registered as certified, meaning that you're seeking certification, you will get the ebook automatically. And I'm sure that Jill Johnson, the executive director of ISCOLS, shared with you the code in order to get the ebook. For those who are auditing the course, again, you may be able to get, if you're interested in the book, you may be able to get it also at a significant discount. The book is, you know, because its thickness and its hardcover, it's $200 and something. But when you get it as an ebook, it's discounted to something like $54, again, US dollars. I have a course website, and I've communicated that to you by email, and I gave you the password, the user ID, as well as the password for accessing the website. So what I'll be doing is we're going to be posting the PowerPoint slides on the course website, as well as I'm going to share those with you by email. But in addition, in the course website, I have not only the course syllabus, but I will have the videos every time we're done with a webinar. It will be posted on the course website, and I guess if it's, I may be able to share it with you by email if it's not large enough. That's the reason why I'm doing it on the course website, is because, again, if it's very large, then I'm not going to be able to email it to you. So it depends on the size of the video recording. The only difference between an audit and a certification, of course, is that you'll get the same information. But for those of you who want to be certified, right after each webinar, I'll send you a list of essay questions, and you would respond accordingly. And these will essentially be graded and given a passing grade that you get certified as having passed the course at the end. Before we go on, and you're talking about Ukraine and what's happening in the world today, especially you know, I would like to share with you a moment of silence. A moment of silence to mourn. What are we mourning? We're mourning the loss of life in Ukraine. We're mourning the loss of democracy. We're mourning the loss of, or maybe not the loss, but literally the rise of fascism. We're mourning a major setback to civilized society. And ultimately, we're mourning a major impediment to human well-being. So just have just a few seconds, maybe 1 minute of silence that we can share our thoughts about this incident. Okay. Let's talk about course logistics before we get started. I'm going to be using the PowerPoint slides, and I'm sharing those PowerPoint slides with you. So for those who feel comfortable, going through the webinar, and you can activate your own PowerPoint slides and you take notes on the PowerPoint slides, that would be a good thing. I usually do that when I attend webinars. I don't know exactly what's your modus operandi, but if you do that, that would be a good way to do it, to take notes. Questions and answers. We've got so much to cover in terms of topics, in terms of concepts, in terms of research. So may I ask you to hold off whatever questions you have and literally type your questions in the chat room. And so you'll hold off on those questions and answers till the end, and I'll be able to look at the chat room and see what questions you may have, and whatever time we have left at the end, we'll be able to address those questions. Okay. We're going to have a 10-minute break right in the middle of this. I'm sure that it's going to get a little tiring listening to me and what I have to say about the research on well-being, but so we'll have a 10-minute break right in the middle of the first webinar. And I hope that we'll be able to finish all the slides, but again, in the event that we don't, you have the PowerPoint slides. If you have any questions about those slides that we were not able to cover any in any thorough way, then you can ask whatever questions you may have. Or if you have the book, of course, then you'd be able to read the book, and that would be a good substitute. Okay. So you see the first slide, and it shows you the cover of the book, and it deals again with the research on happiness, subjective, interchangeable terms that we used in relation to well-being. We talk about subjective well-being. Subjective, it really captures the psychology of well-being. Perceived quality of life, life satisfaction, domain satisfaction, positive emotions, psychological well-being, positive mental health. All of these are interchangeable terms or interchangeable concepts, but there are definitely distinctions, and we'll talk about those distinctions. But again, we're talking about the umbrella, the overall umbrella of the concept of well-being, and again, these are interchangeable terms that we will be using. As I mentioned, again, the modules that we'll be covering, we have 10 webinars, and these are reflective of the chapters. So today we're going to be focusing on chapters 1 and 2 and chapter 3 of the book. Okay. I have my dog in my office. How would I get him out? Because he's chewing on a bone, and the bone is making quite a bit of noise. Just 1 second. Come on. Out. Sorry about the dog. Okay, let's start out with this idea of happiness. Philosophers have addressed the concept of happiness again, throughout the centuries. So, I mean, you can go all the way back to Greek philosophers and talk about Aristotle and Socrates, and they've been talking about happiness and writing so much about it. So we know so much about happiness. So we'll start out with the philosophical foundation of the concept of happiness. Again, happiness is interchangeable with well-being or quality of life. So again, at least in my mind, these are very interchangeable terms. But nevertheless, philosophers usually use the word happiness much more than psychologists. So let's start out with that, because what psychologists have done in terms of treating the concept of well-being is they use the philosophy of well-being as a foundation to develop the different constructs of well-being, psychologically speaking. So understanding the philosophical basis is very important. And as philosophers made a distinction between three concepts of happiness: psychological happiness, prudential happiness, and perfectionist happiness. So again, in the context of philosophy, these are very clearly three distinct types of views or schools of thought related to happiness, i.e. well-being, of course. So what do we mean by psychological happiness? In psychological terms, it translates to what we call hedonic well-being. And we'll try and understand the concept of hedonic well-being. One of the gurus, or essentially the founding fathers of the field of subjective well-being, is Ed Diener, who just recently passed away, by the way. Ed Diener, who was a professor at, well, actually several universities, but most of his professional career he spent it at the University of Illinois. And then later on, he was also affiliated with the University of Utah as well as University of Virginia in the United States. But he is essentially the person that provided the foundation of what we call subjective well-being. And you see a reference here. And the best way to actually capture this concept of hedonic well-being, and then again, we'll try and understand the philosophy behind hedonic well-being through this particular reference: new well-being measures, short scales to assess flourishing and positive and negative feelings. And that has been published in Social Indicators Research. By the way, Social Indicators Research is one of the earliest academic journals that in essence had set the whole quality of life, social indicators, well-being movement. So again, it's a very well-established journal. So understanding the concept of well-being, especially from a hedonic perspective, you can look at this scale, and the scale gives you a gut feel for what hedonic well-being is about. So let me just read how the scale is presented and then talk about the philosophy behind it. So please think about what you have been doing and experiencing during the last 4 weeks. Report how much you experience each of the following feelings. So again, the focus is very much on feelings, emotions. Using the scale below, for each item, select a number 1 to 5 and indicate that number on your response sheet. So again, the rating scale is very much what we call a frequency scale. It goes from very rarely or never all the way up to very often or always. So it's frequency, right? And so what are we measuring? We're measuring a host of positive and negative emotions, positive and negative feelings, from positive positive feelings, negative feelings, good feelings, bad feelings, pleasant feelings, unpleasant feeling, happy feelings, again, sad feelings of being afraid, joyful, angry, contented. All of these are emotions. So in essence, what the person is doing is responding by saying, you know, how frequently I experience those emotions. And the idea then is to capture this idea of hedonic well-being is you sum all the scores related to those positive feelings, and the positive feelings, as you can see from the slides, would be positive, good, pleasant, happy, joyful, and contented. So you sum those scores related to the frequency scores related to those positive emotions, and then you do the same thing with the negative emotions. And in the context of negative emotions, these are negative, bad, unpleasant, sad, afraid, and angry. So you sum those frequency scores there, and then you come up with what we call an affect balance. So you subtract one from the other. In essence, that gives you a balance. So the idea is that you feel happiness if you express a lot more positive feelings than negative feelings, right? That is hedonic well-being because it focuses on hedonia, the pleasantness, the pleasure, or the angst, or the anguish, or the negative experience related to, you know, negative emotions. So other metrics of hedonic well-being would be, again, this one. It's, again, you ask person to come up with a diary, and through the diary, the person, in essence, would keep tab of all those positive or negative emotions that he or she may experience during the day. So this is another example of what you call hedonic well-being, a measurement of hedonic well-being. Participants are given a sampling diary and are instructed to rate their current feelings on a series of affect adjectives. Again, same kind of thing, but it's sort of in a different context. The day reconstruction method, again, the same kind of thing, but it's a sort of a 24-hour kind of a diary. Again, we're talking about variation of that. So before we get into prudential happiness, the concept of psychological happiness from a philosophical point of view focuses on hedonia. So the quality of life, well-being, happiness is nothing but, you know, experiencing positive feelings, positive emotions, feeling contented in life, well, not just in life, but, you know, in everyday life, than negative emotions. So again, that's the philosophical view of what, again, philosophers call psychological happiness. Now, I want to throw a caveat in there, and the caveat is psychologists use the concept of psychological well-being. Psychological well-being is very different from psychological happiness in the way philosophers talk about it. Okay, Doc, you know, keep that in mind, because when we talk about perfectionist happiness, and we'll talk about psychological well-being, which is what psychologists refer to as perfectionist happiness. So the second philosophical concept is prudential happiness. And again, before maybe we get into the measures of what the psychological correspondent of this concept is, philosophically speaking, you say, you know, philosophers would say, you know, you can have a person who may experience a lot of positive feelings, but may not necessarily be happy in life. And the reason being is because that person may have a lot of sex, may be very gluttonous in the way he or she is eating, may have a lot of money to spend to, in essence, make themselves so happy, meaning experience positive feelings. But nevertheless, philosophically speaking, that is not what happiness truly is. So philosophers who countered that, hedonia is not really a good way to view well-being or happiness, but it is what you accomplish in life. What's the good life? And what have you done in your life to make you feel that you have contributed to yourself, to your family, and possibly your community? So achievement is the essence, literally the imperative of what happiness is. Psychologically speaking, we tend to translate this concept of achievement in life in terms of life satisfaction. So psychologically speaking, the psychological correspondent to prudential happiness is life satisfaction. And again, Ed Diener talked about, he came up with this construct of subjective well-being, and life satisfaction is a very important ingredient in what he termed subjective well-being. And the best way to construe this concept of life satisfaction is to look at a measure, which is a very well established. This particular measure, which is called the Satisfaction with Life Scale, is published in the Journal of Personality Assessment, dated back in 1985, and it's a very, very well established measure of life satisfaction. There's so many studies out there have used this particular measure, and look at the items. The measure is very simple. It involves 5 different items. In most ways, my life is close to ideal. So what you do is you measure that on a what you call a Likert life scale, a Likert type scale, which is strongly disagree all the way up to strongly agree. And if you agree with a statement like this, that means that you have quite a bit of, you're satisfied with your life. In most way, my life is close to ideal. The conditions of my life are excellent. I'm satisfied with my life. So far, I've gotten the important things I want in life. If I could live my life over, I would change almost nothing, right? That's what, if you kind of stare at those items and let them sort of, sink in, you'd have a sort of a visceral understanding of the concept of life satisfaction. And that is what prudential happiness is, philosophically speaking. So again, the psychological correspondent is life satisfaction. There are, of course, other metrics of life satisfaction, that have been used in what you call large-scale surveys. And this particular item is very popular. Thinking about your life, your own life and personal circumstances, how satisfied are you with your life as a whole, right? And the response scale is from extremely dissatisfied to extremely satisfied. And that is a very, very, very popular item in many large-scale social surveys. An offshoot of this life satisfaction business is what we call domain satisfaction. So the idea then is that how satisfied you are with your life at large is very much a function of how satisfied you are with different life domains. So if you're satisfied with life domains like your standard of living, your health, what you have achieved in life, personal relationships, safety, community, spirituality, again, these are life domains. And if you feel satisfied with your life domain, it's very likely that you feel satisfied with your life overall. And there's many studies, much research that has demonstrated the predictive validity of this type of scale on other types of global life satisfaction scales, like the one we just like this one here, thinking about your own life and personal circumstance, how satisfied you are with your life as a whole, right? Now, that is what you would call a global measure of life satisfaction. So the domain, which we'll talk, domain life satisfaction tend to predict overall life satisfaction. And again, that has been very well established in the quality of life well-being literature. Okay, let's move on to talk about perfectionist happiness. And perfectionist happiness is a sort of a very different concept. Perfectionist happiness, well, again, philosophy would say, think about a criminal. A criminal may amass so much resources, and again, may be happy with, let's say he was sort of the best mobster or the best gangster in town. So from an achievement point of view, he feel like he has life satisfaction. And from a hedonic point of view, again, he feels a lot of positive emotions. But what is he contributing to society? A criminal is a criminal, right? And therefore, when we're talking about personal growth and development and the extent to which a person becomes mature and contributes to not only himself and his personal development, but also outcomes that are beneficial to the community and society at large, then this is where we're getting into what we call perfectionist happiness, right? Perfectionist happiness. A very different concept, philosophically speaking. And again, the respective psychological concept that we have been dealing with to capture this, what we call perfectionist happiness, is, again, psychological terms, eudaimonia. Although eudaimonia comes from, it dates all the way back to Aristotle, because Aristotle is the one who came up with the concept of eudaimonia, the good life in terms of being virtuous, being brave, being compassionate, being forgiving, and so forth. That is the essence of eudaimonia. Sometimes it's hard to pronounce. This is, again, if you're having a hard time pronouncing eudaimonia, talk about it in terms of psychological well-being. And psychological well-being, the first person who have sort of captured this idea of eudaimonia, philosophically speaking, in psychological terms, is Carol Reif from University of Minnesota. And that was the seminal article that you can see from this reference. Happiness is everything, or is it? Exploration, the meaning of psychological well-being, published in one of the, again, the most elite journals in psychology, which is, of course, the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, all the way back in 1989. So it is a seminal article by Carol Reif. And what she talked about in terms of psychological well-being is at least these 5 dimensions. And that is a person who experience well-being in a eudaimonic sense, right? Perfectionist happiness sense. could be characterized in terms of those 5 dimensions. That person is autonomous, has positive relations with others, feel a sense of mastery in relation to the environment, his or her environment, experiences personal growth, and that person has a purpose in life. So I have in those slides some examples of items, psychological items that would capture those 5 dimensions in terms of autonomy, like I'm not afraid to voice my opinions, even when they are in opposition to the opinions of most people. Well, the person will endorse an item like this is likely to be autonomous, right? You know, would score highly on autonomy. I have confidence in my opinions, even if they are contrary to the general consensus, right? Autonomy. How about positive relations with others? Things like, items like, most people see me as loving and affectionate. I enjoy personal and mutual conversation with family members or friends, right? So you get the gist of what positive relations with others. Environmental mastery, the extent to which the person exert influence over his or her environment. I'm quite good at managing the many responsibilities of my daily life. That person has control, right? I generally do a good job of taking care of my personal finances and affairs. I am good at juggling my time so that I can fit everything that needs to be done. Again, a person that would endorse those kinds of items would score highly on what we call environmental mastery. Personal growth. I think it is important to have new experiences that challenge how you think about the world. I have the sense I have developed a lot as a person over time. Again, personal growth. Purpose in life. I am an active person in carrying out the plans I set for myself. I enjoy making plans for the future and working to make them a reality. I don't have a good sense. Now, this is what we call reverse coded. I don't have a good sense of what it is I'm trying to accomplish in life. Of course, a person would score that reverse. That means that person has low purpose in life. But that would give you an idea, again, what purpose in life is by focusing and understanding what those measurement items are. Oops. Some reason it bumped me. So now I have to go back, and I think I pushed the wrong key. Okay, we're here. There are other measures of eudaimonia, and this one, again, by our, what you call the guru of subjective well-being, Ed Diener, and his many students and colleagues, again, published in Social Indicators Research. It's a short scale to measure or to capture what we call flourishing. Flourishing is another term that we use in relation to eudaimonia. And the
I want to
flourishing.
mention you're not sharing your slides, just so you're aware of that. You just need to
Okay.
share your slides.
Oh, I'm not. Oh, the.
Yep, just click share screen.
Thank you for the alert. Okay. What do you see now? Do you see it?
Yep, you got it.
Okay, so that's the flourishing scale. Good. Thank you, Susan. So the flourishing scale is I lead a purposeful and meaningful life. My social relationships are supportive and rewarding. I'm engaged and interested in my daily activities. I actively contribute to the happiness and well-being of others. Okay, a person who endorsed those kinds of items is flourishing, is experiencing what we call eudaimonia, right? Because that person is not experiencing only personal growth, but that person is experiencing, is achieving positive outcomes in relation to the people around him, the community, society at large. So this is, again, an example of eudaimonia, which is a higher level, a higher concept of well-being. So as you can see, well-being can be construed in terms of different levels of analysis, from the micro level to the macro level, and the most macro level. We talked about it in the context of eudaimonia and social well-being. Social well-being is sort of the ultimate way of being a good person. A good person is not only a good person, but a good citizen, a good family member, a good community resident. That person contributes not only to himself in terms of personal growth and development, but also to the community at large. So that is social well-being. Recently, in 2019 and 2020, I actually wrote a book on that helps us put these different disparate concepts of well-being into some sort of integrative theory, and I call it positive balance. The theory of well-being and positive mental health. And again, the idea is to be able to understand those different concepts of well-being in terms of sort of a hierarchy. The hierarchy goes from the very physiological level to the emotional level, to the cognitive level, the metacognitive level, the developmental level, to the social ecological level. So it goes from the very micro to the very macro. And different concepts of well-being tend to be, can be construed, can be appreciated in terms of those different levels of analysis. Let's try and understand those some more. So at the very bottom level, at the very micro level, if you're talking about well-being, we can talk about well-being in the physiological sense, So what does that mean? Well-being in the physiological sense. It is at the physiological level, subjective well-being is construed as a preponderance, meaning it's so much of neurochemicals related to positive emotions. Now, what are those positive emotions? At the physiological level, these are, again, as neuroscientists have demonstrated over and over again through many, many studies, these are dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. These are the three major ones. There's not to say, I'm sure that neuroscientists say, well, there are other types of neurotransmitters that are involved in the hedonic experience of well-being, but these are the three main ones. So if you have a preponderance, meaning more of these positive neurotransmitters floating in your brain, so to speak, then you're likely to experience well-being. preponderance of those positive transmitters, neurotransmitters, more so than what? What are the negative neurotransmitters? Well, the negative neurotransmitters are essentially, well, the major one is cortisol, and of course, the offshoot of cortisol is adrenaline. So it's very much associated with the stress, with the fight and flight response system at an organismic level. And when you have an animal, and we're animals, social animals, when we're threatened, we either fight or we flee. And when we do this, again, what we experience is the surge of a negative neurotransmitter, which is cortisol. And cortisol essentially activates adrenaline, and all of a sudden you can, the organism can flee effectively or fight effectively. And that's how nature bestowed us, this kind of ammunition, so to speak, physiologically speaking, in order to cope with life. So at a physiological level, well-being can be construed in terms of, the preponderance of positive than negative neurotransmitters. At a further level up, again, now we're talking about at the emotional level. At the emotional level, we're talking about hedonic well-being. Hedonic well-being would be something like the preponderance of positive affect. So psychologists talk about affect as emotions, right? And positive affect, what are examples of positive affect? Would be happiness, joy, elation, and so forth. Negative affect, of course, would be anger, sadness, fear, jealousy, envy. Again, these are the negative emotions. So a person experiences well-being if that person experiences more positive emotions than negative emotions. Remember the concept that, the concept of psychological happiness from a philosophical point of view, and we talked about, again, those scales related to hedonic well-being. Well, that's exactly where we're at this level. At a further level up, again, we're going from micro to macro, we're looking at what we call domain satisfaction. So we experience satisfaction in different life domains. Our mind is very much divided in terms of different life domains. So I ask you, how's your love life? How's your social life? How's your work life? How's your leisure life, right? So people segment their experience in these different life domains, and they make judgments of how satisfied or dissatisfied they are in those different life domains. So the concept of well-being at a cognitive level is a cognitive judgment, right? Cognitive judgment about how they feel in relation to those different life domains. At a cognitive level, subjective well-being is construed as a preponderance of domain satisfaction. Satisfaction in salient and multiple life domains, such as family and work life, relative to dissatisfaction in other life domains. So if those people, for a person who experiences a high quality of life, high level of well-being, that person experiences quite a bit of satisfaction in important life domains, such as work and family, social, and what have you. Depending on, those different life domains can vary in salience, or what we call importance. Different people, like for example, a person who is so much into his or her career would, of course, treat work life as very important. Any kind of satisfaction or dissatisfaction in work life affects life satisfaction at large. So domain satisfaction is very important, and it captures the concept of well-being at the cognitive level. But then we can climb up the ladder one step up. Whoops. at a what we call a metacognitive level. So now we're dealing with something like life satisfaction. Life satisfaction goes over and beyond a domain satisfaction. So we're dealing with a judgment, a cognitive judgment, uh, taking into account everything, all those domains, and using some sort of a standard of comparison to make a judgment of this kind. So when I ask you, how do you feel about your life in general? It's very likely to say, well, I feel happy, but I feel happy compared to my family members or my associates, or compared to my neighbors, or compared to, again, people in my age range, right? So the cognitive judgment is always relative to some sort of a standard of comparison. So if you make those kinds of judgments and you have a preponderance, right, of making those kinds of judgments, and these judgments become, they reflect satisfaction with life more so than dissatisfaction with life, then it's very likely you will be treated as, you have a higher level of quality of life than those people who would make those other kinds of judgments. So this is what we're talking about well-being at the metacognitive level. At the developmental level, now you're looking at a lifespan. And when you're looking at a lifespan, the concept of well-being takes a different form. And the definition that I came up with is as such. At the developmental level, subjective well-being is construed as a preponderance of what? Positive psychological traits like self-acceptance, personal growth, purpose in life, environmental mastery, autonomy, and positive emotions with positive relations with others. These are more enduring, much more trait-like characteristics. They are not ephemeral in the sense that they are transitory. If a person has those traits at the developmental level, this is what we talk about quality of life. This is what we talk about well-being. That person has a higher level of well-being if that person has those kinds of personal traits at the developmental level. And you notice that, again, this kind of concept is very much equivalent to eudaimonia, or perfectionist happiness. So again, you can see the concept of well-being taking a different form as you're climbing up the ladder from the micro to the very macro. But at the very macro is what we call social well-being, which is different from, again, being satisfied in your social life. Social well-being, according to psychologists, and again, there are sociologists among us, the notable person that I can think of who has set the stage for this concept of social well-being from a sociological perspective is Corey Keyes. He's a social psychologist in the sociological tradition. And he defined it, and the way I used his ideas to, again, articulate the concept of well-being at the social ecological level is, at the social ecological level, subjective well-being is construed as preponderance of perceived social resources, social acceptance, social actualization, social contribution, social coherence, and social integration relative to other social things as constraints in the form of social exclusion, ostracism, and the like. So social well-being, you take eudaimonia at a further level up at a, what you might call a community or societal level, and the extent to which the person accepts his responsibilities to his family, to his community, to society at large, the way he not only accepts those responsibilities, but acts on them in terms of, social contribution, social coherence, and social integration, the extent to which that person fits in the context of the overall community, the overall society, and makes a contribution accordingly. That is the ultimate form of well-being. And we call it social well-being. So, and at least in my mind, I was able to put together, again, those well-being concepts and order them in a model. And I was able to explain the connection between, how well-being at the physiological level explains or contributes to emotional well-being, cognitive well-being, metacognitive well-being, developmental well-being, and socio-ecological types of well-being. So you see those arrows that go up, and then how those arrows, different levels of well-being contribute, in a hierarchical fashion, downward as well as upward. So in my book on positive balance, I explain these links or these connections in some detail. So that's the gist of the 3 philosophical views of happiness. Let's take a 10-minute break now. And then the next thing is that we'll talk about the consequences of happiness. Why is happiness, or the concept of well-being, so important in every discipline, from economics, political science, psychology, to you name it, we'll talk about why the concept of well-being is important, because it has those positive ramifications. Let's take a break, okay? I'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay, can we reassemble, reconvene? Um, Great. So what are we doing? Okay, so we're, by the way, can you see my slide that says consequences of happiness? Do you see this? Okay, great. So before we get into this, as you can see from this slide, happiness or well-being or quality of life, tends to affect health life, work life, social life, moral life, cultural life, and the future of happiness. I'm just going to get a sense. I have 40 people on my list here. Now, I see 17 participants right now, so I'm assuming that many of you who registered just want to see the video recording. But at least for those who are with us, the concept of well-being proliferates every discipline that I can think of. I'm not saying mostly in the social behavioral sciences. I'm not gonna, stick my neck out and say every discipline, as in maybe the hard sciences, but let's just focus on the social behavioral sciences, economics, psychology, political science, sociology, other types of applied social sciences from public administration, business administration or management, marketing, hospitality and tourism. Many of those disciplines have adopted the concept of well-being, have adopted the concept of quality of life. It is what you might call the ultimate dependent variable. So in the context of doing research, when you think about it, let's say I'm thinking in terms of management. And this is, I am an industrial organizational psychologist. In the context of management, as well as marketing, because I go into consumer psychology, I'm also a consumer psychologist, but the umbrella of industrial organization covers consumer psychology too. But let's say in the context of management, so much emphasis has been placed on job satisfaction. Job satisfaction. And management scholars, industrial organizational psychologists have hammered on the issue that job satisfaction is so important. And the reason why it's so important is because it affects employee productivity. A happy employee is a productive employee. But now what we're saying as management scholars, it's not good enough to really enhance employee satisfaction, job satisfaction, because it produces what you might call economic returns. We're doing it, or we're advocating organizations to adopt the concept of well-being because it's the right thing to do. It is the moral thing to do. So a lot of industrial psychologists and management scholars have kind of shifted to go from job satisfaction to employee well-being. And the idea then is to try and straddle these two concepts by figuring out, when we're talking about job satisfaction, making a person satisfied with his job or her job is good, of course, but we can do better by making employees more than just satisfied with their job, satisfied with their lives. Satisfied with their life. So what we're doing is we're trying to bridge the gap between job satisfaction to employee well-being, or again, in that context, it would be life satisfaction. So how can you use organizational resources to enhance family well-being, to enhance leisure well-being, to enhance work well-being, to enhance a multitude of types of well-being in different life domains, as such contributing to well-being at large, as in life satisfaction, as in personal growth and development, as in social well-being? How can an organization uses its resources to do just that? The concept of well-being is so powerful, and it is guiding so much research in so many different disciplines. But I'm just giving you an example of what's happening in management, human resources, industrial organizational psychology. In the context of marketing, we also have a movement. You know, so much has been emphasized the idea of customer satisfaction. You know, the essence of marketing, the way you design a product, the way you market a product. I mean, you want to make sure that everything you do, again, it feeds into customer satisfaction, or sometimes consumer satisfaction. Not good enough. Not good enough, because again, now we're talking about consumer well-being. We want to do better than customer satisfaction. We want to make sure that, again, that what we're doing in terms of satisfying the needs of consumers, again, it not only satisfies the needs of the consumer in relation to that particular product in terms of its functional attributes, but the way the product feeds into the fulfillment of every need and every aspect of life. So let's say, for example, how do you design a product? How do you design a car, or maybe a cell phone, in a way that would contribute to leisure well-being, that would contribute to, again, communication well-being, that would contribute to work well-being, that would contribute to family well-being? Can you, again, spur the kind of research that would allow marketers to do better than customer satisfaction? And yes, we are doing that. Hopefully we do a lot more of that in the future. That's why the concept of well-being is so important. It's so important because it becomes literally the basis, the ultimate goal of every social science, social and behavioral science discipline, from economics to management to political science, sociology, and so forth. So going back to the research and looking at the slide, happiness or well-being contributes to health. This particular slide is from, again, our guru, Ed Diener, and his many students and colleagues. This one really captures the essence of much of the research on the extent to which subjective well-being contributes to health. Let me read it to you. It's, you know, every time I read it, I have tears in my eyes because it's so powerful. 7 types of evidence are reviewed that indicate subjective well-being, such as life satisfaction, absence of negative emotions, optimism and positive emotions, causes better health and longevity. For example, prospective longitudinal studies of normal populations provide evidence that various types of subjective well-being, such as positive affect, predicts health and longevity, controlling for the health and socioeconomic status at baseline. Combined with the experimental human and animal research, as well as naturalistic studies of changes of subjective well-being and physiological processes over time, the case that subjective well-being influences health and longevity in healthy population is compelling, However, the claim that the subjective well-being lengthens the lives of those with certain disease, such as cancer, remains controversial. So this is where we draw the line. We're not saying that, again, if you're happy, then that's the cure for all kinds of disease. No, there is no evidence, at least at this time, to suggest that, again, being happy would help you cure cancer. No, that's where you draw the line, right? It is controversial. Although there are studies that kind of hint at that, and I've seen those studies. Positive feelings predict longevity and health beyond negative feelings. However, intensely aroused and manic positive affect may be detrimental to health. Now, this is kind of interesting. So the idea then is that it's not maximal happiness that's good. You don't want to make a person happy 100%. There is balance. Moderately happy is the thing to focus on. And the reason being is because in psychopathology, some of you may understand the concept of bipolar disorders. Again, a person who fluctuates between mania and depression. Goes like that, right? So if a person is in the manic state, well, that person is very, very, very happy, very, very, very excited. Is that person truly happy? No, it's a function of a psychopathology. It's a psychopathological disorder. So the idea of being manic is not to be equated with true and authentic happiness. And this is where, again, Ed Diener and his colleagues provides us with this caveat. Don't go overboard. Plus, there is something to be said about if you're happy, 100% happy, there's no more room for happiness. And much of authentic happiness is based on what you call future happiness. People anticipate that they will become happy in the future. And therefore, if they are totally maximally happy now, then there's no room for growth. There's no room for future happiness. So the idea of when we talk about maximum happiness, we do not talk about maximum happiness. We talk about optimal happiness. It is up to a point in which there may be diminishing returns on happiness and its outcomes. There are also, of course, many studies that have substantiated the positive effect of work, which you already talked about. But again, this slide, tells you exactly what the studies have produced in terms of those positive outcomes. Employee productivity, job performance, higher pay, higher supervisors rating, personal achievement, long-term financial achievement, creative thinking and problem solving, organizational citizenship, greater cooperativeness and less conflict in group projects, lower rates of absenteeism and tardiness, lower turnover and accident rates. There's so much research that has substantiated, validated the impact of happiness, well-being on those things, on those outcomes. The same thing can be said in terms of, again, the social sphere, and that is an active participation in social activities and involvement in one's community. So a person who experiences a high level of subjective well-being is a person that participates in all kinds of social activities and is very much involved with community activities. And of course, being involved with community activities generates a higher level of community quality of life. Positive effects on, moral. So that's the moral dimension. Cooperation and ethical decision-making. Happy people tend to be much more cooperative. They tend to engage. They tend to make decisions that are quite ethical. They tend to engage in helping behavior. They tend to be much more altruistic than those people who are unhappy. They tend to volunteer more and contribute to their community a lot more. On culture, positive effects have been substantiated on generalized trust in others, trust in institutions, and democratic attitude. Talking about trust, my goodness, I mean, society and every societal institution, the efficacy of those institutions is very much based on trust. If people do not trust government, if they do not trust businesses that they transact with, then things stall. Things come to literally a halt. Things cannot be expedited without trust. And happy people tend to be more trusting, and therefore society at large functions better when people are more trusting. And talk about democratic attitude. I hate to mention Russia, but right now, Russia is on my shit list. Excuse the French. Well, no, let me rephrase that. Putin is on my shit list, not the Russian people. There are many Russian people that are much more democratic and yeah. Future happiness. Future happiness is also, so, talking about wealth. When you have money, you make money, right? You have wealth, wealth begets more wealth. Same thing with happiness. If you're a happy person, it's very likely that you will be happy in the future, because, or maybe you're likely to be more happy, happier, right? Your well-being is likely to increase as a function of your current level of happiness. If you're miserable, it's likely to spiral down. If you're happy, then it's very likely to spiral upwards. And there's much research that substantiate this idea of a spiral upward happiness. But also in the clinical psychology literature, psychopathology, is that when a person becomes depressed and things go bad, things get worse and they spiral downwards all the way up to, well, very bad outcomes. Okay, well, I think we can stop at that. So next time, what we'll do in the next webinar, we'll start talking about objective reality and its effects on happiness. And this is what we're going to talk about, the effect of demographics as an age or gender or marital status. We'll talk about the effect of technology, the political systems. There are a lot of objective aspects of reality that impacts our feelings of well-being, whether it's hedonic well-being or again, prudential well-being or perfectionist types of well-being. So we'll talk about all of that next time. And in the meantime, what we'll do is, for those, I'm going to post the recording on the course website. And again, if it's manageable, I may be able to send the recording through email for those people who are not attending, at least didn't get a chance to attend this time. And for those who are taking the course for certification, I'm going to be communicating with you personally and privately. I will send you those essay questions, and I will ask you to ponder on those questions and to deliver a response by the the next webinar, which is next Tuesday, same time. Okay. Okay. Well, it's good to see faces and good to meet you. I already communicated with some of you by email, and we'll go to the next webinar and wish you well. Bye now. Oh, I'm sorry. I see 5 questions in the chat room. What I'll do is, given that we're out of time, I will try and respond to those and will send my responses to you by email. Hope that would work. Okay. Okay. Bye now.